There is a kind of grip that only tightens the more you notice it, a hand closing around water, certain that force will make it stay. This is where we begin. Not with an answer, but with a hand and water, and the quiet panic of watching something slip through fingers that are trying too hard to hold it. You have felt this before. Somewhere in a small room of your life, you pushed toward a thing you wanted. Sleep, love outcome, belonging, and the pushing itself became the wall. The harder the reach, the further the retreat. As if the universe kept one strange rule hidden beneath all the others. That wanting, past a certain pressure, becomes its own opposite. There is an old name for this pattern, half remembered across traditions that never spoke to one another. Backwards law. Not a law of physics. Not a commandment carved anywhere. More like a shape that keeps appearing, in the sleepless night made worse by trying to sleep, in the smile forced until it aches, in the hand so tight around water that the water is already gone. Picture it plainly. A swimmer caught in a current, arms thrashing toward shore, each stroke pulling them further out. The instinct is to fight harder. The instinct is wrong. What saves a swimmer, more often, is the strange discipline of going slack, floating where the current will let them float, until the water itself turns and carries them back. Nobody teaches this in the moment of drowning. It has to be known before, so the body remembers what the mind forgets. This is the shape we are circling tonight, the current, the grip, the hand, and the water. Not to solve it. Solving it would only be one more form of gripping, but to sit near it, the way you might sit near a fire whose warmth you do not fully understand, and let it show you what it shows. Because underneath the current lies a question that will not let go of us, however far we swim. Why does trying, past a certain point, undo the very thing it reaches for? Notice how ordinary this pattern is once you start looking for it. The plant overwatered out of love, drowning in the very care meant to help it grow. The conversation rescued so many times from silence that the silence becomes the only thing either person can hear afterward. The muscles stretched too hard for flexibility, tearing instead of lengthening. Nothing exotic here. Nothing hidden in a locked room. Only a shape repeating at every scale, from the smallest gesture to the largest ambition, as if effort itself had a ceiling that no one warns you about. Perhaps this is why certain old stories linger the way they do. The cup that only fills when no one is watching it fill. The door that only opens to the hand that has stopped pushing. Stories are not evidence. They are only the marks left behind by people who bumped into the same wall in different centuries and tried each in their own tongue to draw its outline. Oh? Let the image widen slowly, like a lens pulling back from a single face to the crowd around it. Consider happiness, the outer layer of this backwards law, the one everyone touches first. Chase it directly, and it behaves like smoke. Visible, present, gone the instant a hand closes around it. Every tradition that has looked honestly at joy has noticed the same evasiveness. The pleasure sought for its own sake curdles fast. The laugh manufactured to prove a good time is being had rings hollow even to the one laughing. Something in the structure of joy seems to require it be a byproduct, never a target, a window that opens because you are doing something else, not because you built the whole house staring at the window. Think of the person who tries hardest to be happy, checking their own mood the way one checks a wound again and again, pressing to see if it still hurts. The checking becomes the wound. Contrast them with someone absorbed, hands in soil, eyes on a task, no thought spared for whether joy has arrived, and joy arrives anyway, sideways, uninvited, because no one was watching the door. Consider, too, the strange fate of celebration itself. A gathering planned so meticulously that joy is expected to arrive on schedule, at the exact hour written on the invitation, often produces instead a kind of exhausted performance. Everyone smiling on cue, no one quite feeling it underneath. Compare that to the unplanned evening, thrown together from leftovers and low expectations, where laughter arrives uninvited and stays for hours. The difference was never the food, or the guest list, or the effort spent. The difference was whether joy was the guest of honor, watched at the door, or simply another visitor who wandered in because the door was left open and no one was checking who came through it. This is the outer symbol, happiness slipping from the grasping hand. But the pattern runs deeper than any single feeling. It runs into the architecture of control itself. Move inward to the second layer, the grip on the self. There is a species of suffering that comes only from resisting suffering. Watch it closely, and its shape is almost geometric. Pain arrives, and then a second pain arrives on top of it, made entirely of the wish that the first pain were not there. The original ache might last minutes. The resistance can last years. Anxiety, looked at from this angle, is not simply fear. It is fear of fear, a hand gripping a hand, a wave trying to flatten itself and only rising higher for the effort. Here the backwards law turns personal, almost intimate. The man who tries hardest to appear confident becomes the most visibly afraid. The mind that tries hardest to stop a thought gives that thought a throne. Say to yourself, right now, do not think of a flame, and notice what appears immediately behind your eyes. This is not weakness. It is structure. The nervous system, asked to suppress, must first summon the very image it is suppressing, and in summoning it, feeds it. So control curls back on itself. The tighter the fist around the self, the more the self resembles something being crushed rather than something being kept. There is a particular weight to this that shows up in the body before it ever reaches the mind. A jaw clenched through a meeting no one asked you to win, shoulders drawn toward the ears while reading a message that has not even arrived yet. The body, in its honesty, often knows the grip has tightened long before the thoughts admit it. This is why so many old practices begin not with the mind at all, but with breath or posture or the simple unclenching of a hand, as though the quickest door back to a looser self runs through the body, not around it. And yet, this loosening cannot be forced either, or it becomes one more thing gripped. Told to relax, the shoulders often tighten further, offended at being commanded. Told to breathe deeply, the breath catches, self-conscious, what? Even relaxation, chased hard enough, obeys the backwards law. This is only the second layer, the psychological one. Underneath it lies something older, stranger, closer to the marrow. The third and deepest layer is the self trying to secure itself against its own passing. Every grasping for joy, for control, for love, for meaning sits atop one grasping beneath them all. The wish to be safe, permanent, unthreatened by time. This is the current beneath the current. We do not only reach for happiness or calm. We reach, underneath all of it, for a guarantee that we will not dissolve, that this fragile arrangement of breath and memory called the self will hold its shape against the tide. And the backwards law, in its oldest and least comfortable form, whispers that the tighter this grip, the more visible the dissolving becomes. The person most terrified of irrelevance becomes, through that very terror, someone others quietly move away from. The person most desperate to be remembered often becomes hardest to remember warmly. The hand closing around permanence finds only the proof of impermanence, closer and closer with every second it squeezes. Here the image returns, transformed. It was never really water in the hand. It was time. It was the small, mortal, magnificent fact of being a temporary shape in a world that keeps moving. No pressure of the fingers changes that. And here the law turns gentle instead of cruel. No pressure needs to. The hand can open. The water was always going to move through it either way. The only choice was ever whether to fight the movement or to feel it. This is not resignation. Resignation is still a form of gripping, just gripping the idea of giving up. What the backwards law seems to point toward, if it points anywhere, is something quieter than either fighting or surrendering. A kind of attention that does not clench. Effort without grasping. Care without control. A hand held open, palm up, doing everything it can while owning none of the outcome. Whether this is wisdom or simply a story we tell ourselves to survive the current is not something this voice can settle for you. It is offered only as a shape worth sitting with, the way firelight is worth sitting with, without needing to know exactly how fire works. Notice, too, how this deepest layer touches even the way we hold other people. The friendship gripped too tightly, checked on too often, asked too many times whether it is still solid, tends to feel the strain of the checking rather than the safety it was meant to provide. The love that insists on proof, again and again, teaches the proof to feel hollow with repetition. Nothing was ever made safer by the gripping. It only felt, for a moment, like safety was closer, the way a drowning hand feels closer to the surface the instant before it pulls itself under. Oh? What follows are not instructions. They are doorways, quiet, ordinary, open to whoever wants to stand in one for a while. The first is the practice of the open hand. Sometime today, notice a moment of wanting, for a text to arrive, for a meeting to go well, for silence in the house. Instead of pushing toward it, imagine your hand physically opening, palm up, releasing the wanting like a weight set down. Notice, only notice, whether anything shifts in the chest when the grip loosens. The second is the practice of the paradoxical night. On the next night, sleep will not come. Stop trying to fall asleep. Lie still, eyes open if they must be open, and instead try gently to stay awake just a little longer. Do not fight this instruction with effort. Let it be almost playful. Many who try this find that the trying to stay awake dissolves the very tension that trying to sleep had built. The third is the practice of naming the second pain. When discomfort arrives, a worry, an old memory, pause and ask quietly whether what you feel is the discomfort itself or the resistance stacked on top of it. Say inwardly, this is the first wave, and this, separately, is the second wave I am adding. Often the second wave, once named, grows smaller almost immediately. The fourth is the practice of unwatched joy. Choose one activity today: cooking, walking, drawing, repairing something small, and do it without checking, even once, whether you are enjoying it. Let the checking rest. See what arrives in the corners of attention once the mirror is put away. The fifth is the practice of the loosened current. If a worry about the future rises tonight, picture yourself as the swimmer, arms tired, current strong. Instead of thrashing toward the shore of certainty, imagine going slack in the water of not knowing, just for one long breath, floating rather than fighting, for exactly as long as the breath lasts. The sixth is the practice of the borrowed permanence. Sit for a few minutes with something old, a stone, a photograph, a worn object pass through hands before yours. Let it remind you, without words, that things last longest not by gripping their shape, but by allowing small changes across a long time. Ask what in your own life might be held a little less tightly, and a little longer for the loosening. The seventh and quietest is simply this. Once today, when you notice yourself gripping, jaw, a plan, a person, an outcome, pause, breathe once, and ask nothing more than, what would this feel like held a little more openly? No answer is required. The question alone tends to soften something. None of these doorways demand belief. They ask only for a few minutes, and a willingness to notice what is already happening in a hand, the jaw, the breath, the chest, small instruments that were measuring the grip long before the mind agreed to look. Oh, there is one more doorway, quieter still, easy to miss because it asks for almost nothing. Simply notice, across an ordinary day, how many times the word should arrives uninvited. I should be further along. I should feel differently. I should have handled that better. Each should is a small fist closing around a moment that has already happened or has not happened yet. Just noticing the word without arguing with it, without agreeing with it either, tends to loosen its grip by a fraction. Some days that fraction is enough. And a final one, for the nights when none of this feels like enough, place a hand plainly over the chest and let it rest there without pressing. Not to calm anything, not to fix anything, only to remind the body that it is being kept company, gently by itself, which is sometimes the only company available and sometimes quietly enough. Oh, none of this is offered as the final shape of things, only as one lens ground slowly by many hands across many centuries, held up now to see if any light comes through it differently. The backwards law is not a fact carved into the world's foundation, waiting to be discovered like a buried stone. It is closer to a pattern certain people in certain rooms across long stretches of time kept noticing and kept trying to describe: the swimmer, the hand, the smoke of joy, the fist around the self. Whether it describes something true about existence or only something true about the peculiar architecture of human wanting is a question this voice will leave exactly where it found it, open. What can be said gently is this: the tightest grip rarely holds the most. The loudest reaching rarely arrives the soonest. And somewhere between effort and surrender, there seems to be a third place, quieter, less dramatic, almost embarrassingly simple, where a hand opens not because it has given up, but because it has finally noticed what it was always holding. This is not a call to stop caring, or to stop working, or to want nothing. A field still needs tending. A body still needs discipline. A friendship still needs attention paid to it, and a craft still needs hours poured into it that no shortcut will replace. The backwards law does not ask anyone to abandon effort. It only asks that the effort be placed where it belongs in attending, the practicing, the showing up, and released from the part that was never within reach to begin with, the part that tries to grip the outcome itself, the joy itself, the permanence itself, as if wanting hard enough could ever be a substitute for time doing what only time can do. Maybe this is the oldest trick hidden in plain sight. That piece was never behind a harder push, only on the other side of a softer hand. Perhaps that open hand is not weakness. Perhaps it was the strength being looked for all along, disguised as the absence of a fight. The water was never the enemy. The current was never punishing anyone. It was only ever moving, the way it always moves, waiting to see whether the hand in it would clench, or at last unclench, and let itself be carried a little further than fear alone would ever have swum. Sit with that, if you like, or do not. Either way, the current keeps moving, patient, indifferent, and endlessly willing to teach the same lesson again tomorrow, to anyone still gripping tonight. None of it needs to be decided this evening. The swimmer does not have to solve the current before entering the water. They only have to remember, somewhere beneath the panic, that the current was never the enemy, only the shape the world takes when a tired hand refuses, for one long breath, to fight it. Oh, thank you for walking through the dark with me tonight. Until next time, stay close to the truth.